This podcast is a member of the Red 5 Network. For more Red 5 Network podcasts and content creators, visit bio.link/red5.
This station is now the ultimate power in the universe.
Hey folks, and welcome to a very special edition here on the Scare of Scuttlebutt podcast. This is Ro, your friendly neighborhood podcast host, and I'm glad you guys found us. This is going to be a very special stream tonight, and I'm very excited. As you guys know, one of the biggest reasons that I'm into Star Wars is because of all the people behind the scenes, the designers, the creators. You know, obviously George Lucas had a great team of creative people behind the scene at early ILM and beyond, of course. But one of the things that really fascinates me as a fan of the franchise is all the wonderful talent behind the scenes that created this universe that we are all in love with. And, you know, we all know names like John Dykstra and Ben Burt. We get excited when we hear, you know, names like that behind the scenes for those of us who kind of used all of the behind the scenes documentaries almost as a textbook of how this universe was created, from the model work to the special effects, the green screen, the blue screen. You know, really the green screen didn't come in until later on in ILM's history there, but that's another story. But one of the names that should also remain in the history books here when it comes to Star Wars is Colin Cantell. Colin Cantell was responsible for designing a lot of the very wonderful ships that we are in love with in one incarnation or another. I was doing a rewatch of the Andor series, just to you know, prep myself for season 2 of Andor, and I completely forgot that the folks on that show used the Cantell series of spaceships in one of the scenes, and it was really fantastic to hear, and you know, obviously know that Colin Cantwell's contribution to Star Wars is alive and healthy. And like I said, it's one of the things that I really enjoy when I'm watching Star Wars, is kind of really, you know, besides the spaceships and the laser swords, I really am into you know, finding out and really, you know, knowing the history behind the design of this galaxy far away. Because obviously, you know, as much as I continue to say that it's a documentary and it happened a long time ago, somebody had to design all that stuff and put it together for us to enjoy. Tonight we have a very special guest, and I'm very eager to bring her out. Sierra Dall is Colin Cantwell's former partner, and we're going to be talking a little bit about the history of Colin Cantwell's designs, some stories that we can kind of share with you guys. We've got some videos, and it'll be an amazing stream because I'm very excited to bring her out. So why don't let's bring her out and say hello to Sierra.
Hey
How
there,
are
Ro.
you?
I'm great. How are you?
Fantastic. Thank you very much. I'm going to switch screens here and go this way. But thank you so much for you know, coming on, and I'm very excited to hear some of the stories and share a lot of the images that you provided to us, and then just kind of hearing a little bit about Colin's trajectory.
Yes, I'm really excited to tell you about it. I'd like to clear up one thing, is that Colin actually was the very first employee of the company. He was designing these ships while Lucas was looking for a studio. So a lot of people give other people credit for this, but Colin actually was drawing them, the concept art, when Lucas was looking around, and it was before anybody else got involved. he was working by himself. Sometimes you hear people talking about a team of people designing it. There was no team. It was Colin.
Okay.
So, yeah.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So even before, the name Ralph McQuarrie came about, even before all that, he was the top honcho, huh?
He was the first employee. He was working with Lucas and designing, working with George behind the scenes. And he created the ship's concepts, and then he would show them to George and get some feedback on it and then redesign them. Ralph McQuarrie was the second person involved. So
Wow.
he was the second employee. And Ralph took Colin's designs and actually, put them into his beautiful artwork.
Sure.
One of the things that I saw online, which was interesting, was a drawing that George had made of the TIE fighter, the X-Wing, and the Death Star. And people gave him credit for creating those ideas and handing them to Colin. But if you look at the Death Star, it had a trench in it. And the Death Star trench came after Colin designed it. So he had an issue with the trench. So George had to have taken those drawings of Colin's and Colin's concepts and drew them for his own use rather than him presenting it to Colin for him to redesign or to come up with the idea. So it was originally Colin's idea for the Death Star and the trench and the TIE fighter and the X-Wing, among a whole slew of other ships for the movie.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously, we're going to touch a little bit on the TIE fighter. There's a video that you have where you recorded Colin talking a little bit about the I guess the design concept and some of the philosophy that he had regarding the ships.
Yes, he did. He thought of the ships as characters in the movie. So when he came up with the ideas, he was thinking about what did they represent in the movie and what role did they play. So for instance, the TIE fighter was considered to be the bad guy.
Mm-hmm.
So it had to be ominous. And his original concept of the TIE fighter came from the idea of kites flying. So it was something that was a design that had to be so different that people would recognize it. And of course, when you hear the TIE fighter in the movie, you already know who it is, and you have this
Oh
feeling
yeah.
about the bad guys and the ominous vehicle coming towards you. So the same thing with some of the other ships. They all had to have their own roles. The good guy ships had to feel good, and the bad guy ships had to feel bad. And like I said, he looked at them as actors.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny, I mentioned Andor earlier before we started. And one of the things that that is very prominent is, early on in the series, you don't see a lot of like stormtroopers or ships or things like that. It's very character driven. But there is one of the first things that you see if you talk about these ships being a character is a TIE fighter going going over a valley, doing a patrol, but you don't actually see the TIE fighter. You hear it first. And there is this sense of foreboding, ominous, power that the characters on screen are reacting to because they can hear the TIE fighter and then they see it. So it works perfectly as a character. And I've always thought that, that the music in the films are characters unto themselves. But I never really thought of, I guess I have, that the ships can also be characters because obviously, Colin's designs, I mean, the X and the TIE fighter, they are images that can be recognizable instantly, even if they're just silhouettes. And I find that amazing.
Well, with the TIE fighter particularly, there were some rules around how to create the TIE fighter. And one was
Mhm.
that it had to be a complete mystery. And people
Yes,
couldn't know how anybody got into it. And
right.
so it had to be stealth and different. So particularly in the area of being a mystery, it had to be very secretive. And that's exactly what Colin came up with.
Sure. And I have a video. We'll roll that in a second, but this is Colin Cantwell. You recorded him talking about the TIE fighter, correct?
I did. We had to move in 2014 after being together, 16 years. And he never told me about what was in the basement. So I never knew what he had. And he didn't want to talk about anything Star Wars. He was particularly interested in his work with 2001 Space Odyssey, and also work with Walter Cronkite on the first moon landing, which is a whole other story. But he didn't want to talk much about Star Wars. And so I discovered in 2014, when we had to move, that he had all the original concept art in drawers in the basement.
Wow.
You know, and I didn't even know about it. You're talking about the original drawings that he presented to George Lucas back in probably 1975.
Wow, that's
So,
amazing. That's amazing.
yeah.
So yeah, let's hear what Colin has to say about the TIE Fighter, and we'll come back after this clip.
Tell us about the TIE Fighter.
The TIE Fighter is largely a mystery, and it stays largely a mystery. It comes out of the Death Star, and it has all sorts of rules. There are about 5 lines of rules, and they tell the person delving into the rules section what they can't know about. So it is so secret, they can tell that it has somebody flying it, but they can't learn about who flies it, where they come from, other than from the Death Star, and they can't tell any of the details of how it's so effective and deadly. And that's unbreakable.
So how did you come up with the design? What was your inspiration? Do you remember? It's so unusual.
It is unusual, and that was one of the rules. So it's evil. It comes and goes. It emerges, and in battle, it's very effective. So it's good guys beware.
And it's very distinctive, the sound as it comes, so you can recognize it even before you see it.
Yes, that's one of the distinctive things, and we can't tell how it got that way.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I mean, it's amazing to me that that he had all this material in the basement, like you mentioned before the clip. It's kind of a treasure trove when it comes to archival material, especially when it comes to behind the scenes of creating Star Wars. It's something that it's unfathomable to me to know that somebody had all that stuff in the basement.
You have no idea.
Yeah.
Yeah. We had wall-to-wall, floor-to-ceiling boxes in the basement.
Wow.
The entire basement was full of wall-to-wall, floor-to-ceiling boxes, not just one aisle. And
Yeah.
Colin had remnants of his entire movie history down there. All the stop action motion picture camera from Buck Rogers. You're looking at trains and planes, and the drawing he made for Frank Lloyd Wright. I mean, just like I said, boxes and boxes
Sure.
of articles, artifacts.
That's amazing. It's amazing. So Colin passed away in May of 2022. And obviously, like I mentioned, his name is one of those names that, if you're a fan of Star Wars, especially stuff behind the scenes, it's kind of embedded in your brain. One of the things too that you wanted to touch on is the concept of kit bashing, and I know that that has been prevalent in the fandom, but it's a concept where you take a lot of model kits and you kind of take certain parts of it and then make something new by adding some George Lucas, I guess, called them greeblies, like little odds and ends to put on something. And one of the things that I'll pop this up. Explain this image to us. What is this image about?
All right. Well, Colin had been kit bashing apparently since 2001, Space Odyssey. And I did some research on that to see how far back it went. And it looks like it was before that even. He used to have drawers of parts of different kinds of planes, trains, cars, model kits. And that's what he did, was build models. So when he went to show George how models might be able to be made for the movie, he put this together, this very intricate ship. And apparently he had two of them. This is one of them. George took a magnifying glass or some kind of a glass and took a really close look at this. He was eyeing it into the intricacies of all the details. You can, if you look at it, there's people standing on the bridge, there's people inside. I mean, it's really complex. So this was the Kit Bash ship, and it's essentially the first ship of anything for Star Wars, because this is where it started, where George looked at it. And with Colin's background with Walter Cronkite, he sat behind Walter Cronkite on the first moon landing, telling him what to say on television. So he had a serious NASA background. And then also 2001 and other clips before that, other films. And with all that combination, he decided he wanted to hire Colin to design the ships. So this is where it started.
That's amazing. So much intricate detail, and I can see, obviously there's a little bit of relationship between how we see the ships in Star Wars to what he created as far as building something, and it goes a long way to that. When you're a Star Wars fan, about the used universe, the look and feel of Star Wars. It has this very industrial feel to it, especially with the ships and the mechanics and all the props and things like that. So obviously some wonderful contributions by Colin.
Yes, he certainly did. He designed not only the Y-wing, the X-wing. I have pictures of him in his workshop with the ships sitting on the counter way back
Yes.
when, where
Mhm.
they were in pieces. It's fascinating. Each of them has its own story.
Yeah, I'm sure it does. What was his background? Because I think I noticed a lot of people, some of the early ILM employees were not filmmakers. They worked on television commercials back in the day. There were obviously the some of the artists were more mechanical in nature, which I think goes a long way to adding a certain realism to a space fantasy. We talk about how up until Star Wars, a lot of science fiction had shiny things and everything kind of looked new, and it lended itself, the way that George used the people behind the scenes, it lended itself to a more realistic way of seeing science fiction from then on. What was Colin's background as far as education and art and stuff like that?
Well, one thing I know for sure is that he read through the entire library of the school, grade school, by the end of the first year. So
Wow.
he was smarter than a lot of his teachers in many ways, and he had a hard time in school because they gave him a hard time because he'd be correcting the teachers. So after that, he was deeply involved and interested in space, aeronautics. He had model airplanes that he used to fly himself, with a group of people, cars he used to race, MGM, I believe this is cars, MGs. And he also, in college, he studied engineering and then art. And then he also suggested the animation major for UCLA. So he was one of the first animation graduates from UCLA. But he has always been interested in outer space and anything that's mechanical. So we had books in our library of everything you could possibly imagine, from ancient ships to how airplanes are built, and all these different things. So when he did something, he had a good feeling for the mechanics of it as to whether it could be realistic or not. So all of his ships had some capability of actually flying in some fashion. They weren't just made up from his mind as a
Mhm.
fantasy. It had to have a reality to it.
That's fantastic. And, you know, obviously it worked because just the look and feel of these ships are amazing. And, you know, it's funny. It's the designs are so simple, but they work so well. I mean, the TIE fighter is, you know, obviously like a little bow tie, the X-Wing, the Y-Wing. Do you know if it was kind of like his idea to kind of do the nomenclature, the naming of the ships that are so, you know, iconic with their names?
Well, I know for sure that he named the X-Wing and the Y-Wing. I believe George may have named the TIE fighter, but I can't say that for sure. I don't
Mm-hmm.
think that Colin named the TIE fighter. But
Interesting.
yeah, for sure the X-Wing and Y-Wing.
Interesting. So let's backtrack a little bit, and we've got obviously you mentioned the treasure trove of signed you know, imagery and photos and drawings and things like that. I want to put up on screen the website. I want to make sure that people are aware of the website and what you're doing there. But you know, this is I've been telling some of our followers and some of our audience, you know, this is kind of a really great opportunity to own a little piece of history, obviously, especially for Star Wars fans, the ability to, you know, log on to the website and kind of snoop around and see what's available. But there's a lot of art pieces that are signed and, you know, created by Colin, obviously, but let's talk a little bit about what's available on the website and why it's so much fun for a fan.
Well, we have, before Colin passed, it was COVID. So we didn't have much opportunity to go to many Comic Cons at that time, but he always pre-signed the prints. So we had photos that he actually took of the models after he built these X-Wing, the Y-Wing, the original Millennium Falcon, which is not the same as the current Millennium Falcon. All of these, like I said, have stories behind them. You're looking at the TIE Fighter, the let's see what else is on there. Skyhopper and a whole bunch of other prints. But there are photos of the models, and then we also have prints of the original concept art. And going back to the Colin Cantwell Arrestor Cruiser, that was one of the original concepts. And they didn't use it in the first movie. So like you said, with ILM, they came up with the idea of let's go ahead and use some of Colin's old ideas that he had never been in the movies before and reproduce them. And that's where the Colin Cantwell Arrestor Cruiser came from. But we have all of these prints for sale. And as they go down in supply, they're going up in price. So some of them we have a few of, and some we have more of, but the prices vary according to the supply.
Absolutely. And it's fun, you know, it's fun just to kind of look through the website and check out some of the drawings. I think they're amazing. I think if anybody is a collector, they're definitely frameable. They're wonderful to look at, and obviously they are a piece of this franchise that that we are so in love with, obviously. But there is the website on screen, and you guys have been so kind to us to be able to provide, you know, a promo code. If you guys go to colincantwell.com and look through and see what you guys want to, you know, put in your shopping cart there, use the word SCARIF and enjoy. I think it's 15% off on certain items, not everything. There's a little section there that's got some really great stuff, but please go and at least look through it. But I wanted also to, you know, besides the fact that that these prints and this material are available for sale, there's an educational portion of what you guys are doing with the website. Talk a little bit about that, because I think it's interesting and I think it's worth mentioning.
Yes, definitely. I put out some feelers a couple of years ago, and a TSJ Foundation replied, Eric Jacobs over there. And what they're doing is pretty amazing. Anything that is purchased off the website also goes towards helping children get involved in STEAM programs. That's science, technology, energy, art, and math. And he's created an entire museum around immersive learning and trying to get kids involved and learning what they could be doing with their lives in those areas. So he's going to be doing a lot of displays on Colin's work. Colin got involved with so many different aspects of that. Art with Frank Lloyd Wright when he was accepted into the School of Architecture with Frank Lloyd Wright originally, which Frank Lloyd Wright died before he could actually start studying. And then we're looking at engineering where he's designed some of these ships and the art that he has behind him. So they're going to be doing different displays with Colin's work because he was so diverse in what he did in so many different areas. And again, the whole idea here is to get kids interested in STEAM programs to promote those.
That's amazing, and it's is definitely worth checking out. And it's great. I think it's part of Colin's legacy. I think it's fantastic. Anything else you want to say about the website? I know there's a lot of items on there. You can spend a couple of hours just kind of looking through and trying to make a decision on what to buy. But as you can see behind me, I'm very fond of Darth Vader. So actually, I might pick up a couple of TIE Fighter images there.
Yes, no, the website, Brad Cook did a beautiful job. I started out the website years ago, and then I turned it over to Brad, and he did a beautiful job of redesigning it. He's also writing a book about Colin and a biography. So I'm helping him with that. And that is not going to be out now probably for another year, but it's in the works. And with the website, you can browse around. You can see stories about Colin's history. You can see more information about this STEAM program with TSJ Foundation and what they're doing. And it's an exciting place, and all the different pictures that he get, the concept art and the models that he took, the photos, it's all on there. So yeah, it's a very nicely done website. I'm real proud of Brad and what he did.
Very nice. And the door is always open when you guys are ready to talk about the book. Come on back. I think we'll definitely have some interested folks to talk a little bit about the book and how that's going. Okay, enough of Colin Cantwell. What is your favorite Colin Cantwell print that you have seen?
Oh gosh. Okay. Okay, so I don't know if I have a favorite. I like the original X-Wing design. That's probably my favorite. That was the first one he ever did. And it was done on pencil on dark paper on most of his designs. And you can't really tell it's pencil. It looks like it was actually, done as a painting of some sort. But I would say that's probably my favorite just because it was the first one. And the history behind how he came up with the idea was that he was thinking about throwing darts in an English pub.
Mm-hmm.
And he said he took 3 days to think about it before he came up with the X-Wing concept. And so he just had to sit down and let it mull around in his mind until he came up with the idea. But I would say, yes, that's probably my favorite one.
That's funny. And I can kind of picture him just kind of looking at the pub and looking at the dart, and because I can see the wings on the back of the dart, right? Like, let's see what this is all about.
One of the other ones that I like too, and it's actually the original action scene for the movie. It's the first action scene. And there's a picture of the concept of the Star Destroyer and the stormtroopers coming down out of the Star Destroyer with little tiny lightsabers in their hands attacking the Princess ship. So that was one of the original concepts, and that was also the very first action scene for the movie. So that was really quite interesting as well.
I think I remember seeing a more modern take on stormtroopers with lightsabers in their hands. Interesting. Yeah.
Well, this would be the very first picture of a lightsaber, I'm sure.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And it's interesting too how I guess the evolution of these ships. Obviously, I'm looking at the homepage right now. You've got some of the spacecraft that the images that Colin signed, the cruiser. You've got the Star Destroyer, the Y-wing, and there's one that is labeled early Millennium Falcon, but it definitely does not look like the Millennium
No.
Falcon. It's like I said, it's just wonderful how the evolution of these things kind of transform from one thing to another. But yes, the Millennium Falcon was not the Millennium Falcon, at least from the looks of things here. But what about that Death Star? Wonderful design, and I popped it up on stream earlier, but let's take a look at it again. Beautiful.
Well, the story that Colin tells was that when he went to design the Death Star, he ordered styrene globe, and he was hoping it would come in one piece. And unfortunately, it came in two halves. So he did all the scribing on it and, all the details and everything else. And then he went to put the two halves together, and he discovered that the equator had shrunk around it so that the two halves would not mesh cleanly. And he'd have to do this enormous amount of work in order to clean up that equator to make it something that you could use cameras without showing the seam. So he said, "Hey, George, how would you feel about having this trench in the middle of the Death Star? They could dive in, they could be shooting at each other, it would be tremendous drama."
Wow.
And George said to him, "Well, I'll call you back." And a little while later, he said, "Well, if you can do the extra work, it's a go."
Wow.
So the Death Star trench was actually an accident, and it was because Colin didn't want to do all the work of making that seam so that people couldn't see it.
That's too funny, and it seems logical too for a station that's shaped like a small moon to have some sort of equator, right? Like mechanically, it seems like it would make sense.
Well, yes, true, and that was one of the most dramatic scenes in the whole movie, the fight scene at the end there.
Absolutely,
So
absolutely. Before you met Colin, or during, did he make you a fan of movies like Star Wars, or were you already a nerd, as we call each other, as we call ourselves, really?
I was a nerd, in many ways, yes. Uh, we we bonded. Well, when I met Colin, it was very strange. Uh, I was doing interviews with successful people and at a coffee shop. And so Colin always came in. He had long silver gray hair down the middle of his back. He wore this strange looking Lycra outfit, which I later found out he made his own clothes. And I was curious about him. So I ended up talking to him, and I found out he had something to do with Star Wars. So we went over and I said, "Are you Colin Cantwell?" And he says, "Yeah, what do you want?" Or something like that. I thought, well, this is not a good time. He said, "Oh, no, come on and sit down." And literally within the first 10 minutes, we had tears running down at both of our faces. We had
Wow.
connected so deeply. And yes, I have always been a Star Trek fan and a Star Wars fan, sci-fi fan all my life. So we bonded over that, among a whole lot of other things.
And you can be a Star Wars fan and a Star Trek fan. I think a lot of people, like, especially in the 80s or 90s, there was always that guilty feeling of loving both franchises. But I always call Star Wars or Star Trek the other white meat.
Yes, well, it's a different approach to sci-fi, that's for sure. But
Sure,
they're
sure.
both wonderful. Yeah.
And here we're seeing Colin in front of some of the work that he's responsible with, the X-wing there, and that ship on the bottom there looks. What is that one? The one that's framed?
That one never actually got in the movies in the cast it was supposed to be when he created it. But I think it showed up later on. People call it maybe a Sith ship, or he said it was supposed to ride on top of the Spanish something or another. So, but it never actually turned out that way. I don't think they used it in the first film, The New Hope. But yeah, so that one, I don't know, but I love the colors in that. I love that drawing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I said, these prints are very frameable, and obviously you see a lot of these in behind glass. I wish I had more walls because it's one of those things that definitely would look really nice behind me there. But you see a Star Cruiser underneath there. You see the X-wing, obviously. But it's such a wonderful website and such some amazing pieces there. I can't imagine your surprise when you found out how much material was lurking in the basement there.
Well, I think a surprise is an understatement. I was shocked. He kept
Yeah,
telling me there's something important in the basement, but it wasn't with Colin for his Star Wars background. I was with Colin because of the extraordinary human being that he was. So that was a big surprise. Yes.
sure. And
Uh,
it's funny, you would think that a project as big as Star Wars, you would have, George kind of take the lead in trying to preserve some of that stuff. We obviously see that Lucasfilm has a wide library of things that are either on display somewhere at a museum or in private collections. But I can't imagine the sheer amount of material that exists out there that is related to the films.
well, as far as I know, George has Colin's models, the original models. But yes, I agree. And then things keep showing up in strange places. Like one person found one version of the Death Star hanging in a discotheque from the ceiling, and he
Yeah,
rescued it.
yeah. I think I read about that, and that's too
Yeah,
funny. Um,
yes.
what else was Colin into besides the work that he did for film? And obviously, you mentioned NASA, but
Oh gosh.
it's all fascinating stuff. What other things that you know of was Colin into?
Well, as I mentioned before, his passion was architecture
Mm,
initially. And so he ended up applying for Taliesin School of Architecture with Frank Lloyd Wright. He went there without being invited. They didn't let him in. When he finally got in, he showed Wright his drawings. Wright said to him, "Go back and get your tuition." Colin
oh,
said, "Isn't there a waiting list?" Wright said, "Not for you." So he went back, and Wright had died before he got there. Then he got involved. He had done many short films in the meantime here in college and otherwise. He volunteered for NASA to do some of their promotional material. And so eventually got hired with NASA and did multiple projects with them. Uh, Invited into 2001 Space Odyssey, working with Stanley Kubrick, and he was working with him at nighttime one-on-one designing space scenes, and also responsible for the music that you still now hear. They also sprock da 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 da,
yeah, right,
you know what
yeah.
I mean. That
Hmm.
was Colin's idea. That's why we still hear it today. uh, then of course he
Wow.
ended up with Star Wars, ended up sitting behind Walter Cronkite on the first moon landing. He was the quote unquote HAL 9000 computer that Walter was listening to, and he was telling Walter what to say on television.
Oh,
So there
wow.
was a comm line between NASA and the astronauts, and Colin was listening to that and explaining to Walter what was really happening, whereas the other two stations went by the timeline on the flight plan,
Sure.
which was not accurate because they couldn't land when they thought they could. And Colin said they haven't landed, and the other station said they had, and the station manager saying you'll never work again the rest of your life. And Colin stayed with his program, and he was right, and everybody else was wrong.
Wow.
So designed
That's
the set
amazing.
for war games,
Hmm.
created the first IMAX theater out in California,
Oh, wow.
the Reuben Fleet Planetarium Theater. He wrote the movie, directed it, designed the whole thing,
Wow.
and on and on. There's so much more.
Yeah, that's amazing. I found the image of the X-wing and some of the drawings. But I did I did want to mention there's obviously images of some of the early designs with the signature, and there are images that are also available for purchase with the gold seal.
Right.
Explain a little bit about what the gold seal does and what that is on the website.
Some of them we did not. Okay, let me go back a little bit here. We have, when he couldn't sign anything anymore at the end, he had signed some of the original rough drawings as you're seeing in the bottom left. And we ran out of rough drawings. to match the set. So the seal, before he died, he signed it. So it's a gold seal with his signature on it, and it has a little drawing of an X-wing up and over the top. So that's what it is. So basically it is his signature. Is far less expensive than the original signatures, but it's really a beautiful design, and makes a really good print.
That's amazing. Yeah, it's one of the things that I'm fascinated about when I see some of this early work is just the drawings, the images that existed before anything existed. I think that's obviously one of the one of the biggest reasons I love all the visualization stuff that George and ILM used for this movie. It's just amazing stuff. I think something like that bottom corner image of the ship, it's just exciting to see the evolution of what became an X-wing and how it started. It's one of the things that I really love about Colin's work in general.
Well, did you know the X-wing actually had wheels on it originally?
Oh wow, I did not.
Yes. So George called up Colin one time, and he says, "It's about those wheels." So
That's
Colin,
great.
we have a video of Colin, and he says basically you just had to tear them off. That's what he did.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Sierra, is there anything else you want to touch on before we wrap up? This has been a really eye-opening and wonderful conversation.
Well, I guess one of the things I'd like to just mention, which I briefly touched on before, was all the misinformation on the internet about what Colin has done, giving credit to a lot of other people. And I can understand that because Colin was the original artist, and a lot of people didn't even know about him. They were looking for him until 2014. Nobody even knew where he was. So he kind of disappeared off the face of the earth. But when you go on the internet, you have to understand that a lot of the things people in later model makers are given credit for having created some of these things, whereas it was actually Colin in the original models and concepts back in 1975, 70,
Right.
yeah, 74, 75.
That's amazing. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And like I said, Colin Cantwell's name is embedded in my head, having grown up with a lot of information on magazines like Starlog and Fangoria and some of those old magazines that kind of featured a lot of behind the scenes images and interviews and things like that. I'm very sorry that I never got to see him at a convention. I know, he was doing them up until obviously he couldn't, but it's amazing work. And Sierra, thank you big time for coming on the show and discussing a little bit about his career, his life. And we will obviously continue to learn more about Colin. And hopefully you guys in the chat are able to kind of visit colincantwell.com and check out some of the prints that are available, some of the wonderful images that you guys can frame and, collect. Don't forget, use the promo code SCARIF for 15% off. And let us know what you got. That's always a fun thing. Sierra, any final words? Thank you so much for this wonderful conversation.
Well, I just appreciate you having me on and giving me the opportunity to clear up some misconceptions about Colin and who did what and show some of his work, because he was an extraordinary human being in so many ways. And I love to see his legacy carrying on.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And thank you very much for sharing all that you shared with us. It is truly an honor here on the Scarif Scuttlebutt podcast. I'm going to be putting this show on the audio as well. So if you guys are not YouTube folks, make sure to follow us on wherever you get your other favorite podcasts. We'll put this in the audio feed as well. But Sierra, thank you so much again. I am Ro, and we'll see you next time. Again, like I said, open invite when you guys have that book ready. We'd love to kind of feature that and pick it apart and ask you some questions.
Yeah, it'll be a ways down the road, but I'm excited too. So
Excellent.
I'll let you know. Thanks
We'll
again.
be here. Excellent. Thank you so much. All right, folks. you heard it here. This is Ro from the Scarif Scuttlebutt podcast. Remember, if you have any comments, you want to contribute to the conversation, we've got a hotline, the Scarif Scuttlebutt hotline. Give us a call at 773-234-8659. Leave a message, leave a voicemail, and we'll get to it in a future broadcast. And remember, we are proud founding members of the Red 5 Network. Check out the other Red 5 Network podcasts and shows over at bio.link/Red5. Until next time, that's Sierra, I'm Ro, and that's the Scuttlebutt. Thank you so much.